Hi, everybody, and welcome to this quick overview of Assignment 3, which is our final one here in Work Integrated Learning. I've been so excited to read your interim reports and to see the great progress that has been made with these internships. It's always so exciting when we see people connect with employers and future employers through this process. So well done for having such a great attitude, for going in with the right mindset, and it clearly shows that your employer has had such a great experience with you in the internship. And so well done. Really, really excited to see these connections being made. Now, on to assignment 3. I'm going to go through it very briefly here. The instructions are actually really clear on the instruction sheet, so hopefully that's what you need. And then I will offer one, and if necessary, a second session that you can jump into if you have additional questions for me. Of course, I'm always available by email as well. So let's have a look at assignment 3 together. So assignment 3 has got two parts to it. The first part is an oral presentation of 30 minutes, and the second part is a business report. So the oral presentation is 30 minutes of you delivering your oral, and then there's additional question time on top of that. Now, because we're one-on-one rather than being in a group environment, and you're very, very welcome to have others come along to your presentation, you may be able to go a little bit less than 30 minutes and then allow additional question time. It'll be one-on-one. So we probably won't find that the question time will go for the full 30 minutes. So your total might be sort of 45 minutes with me when you're going through the results of your internship. But as you can see, it's a lot more than other orals that you might have done during your course. So we're really expecting you to think about what you've done in your internship, your experience has been, and then also to reflect and think about how that links to learning that you've completed during your time here at CHC. So the way it will work is that you will do your oral presentation first. In the next couple of weeks, you will reach out and make a time with me for that oral presentation. You'll need to allow an hour for that. The best days for me are Tuesday and Thursday. And so those would be my preferences in week 13. And we'll make a time and we'll set that up right now in a calendar appointment. After you've delivered your presentation, you'll then have a week to take on board any of the feedback that we give live during that oral presentation and build that back into your report. So the way that it would work is that you prepare a draft report, and that's what you're going to be using to base your presentation on. And then afterwards, you've then got a week to adjust that draft report and get it ready to submit. The report's worth 30%. Oh, sorry, I've got that incorrect in the different places. Your oral presentation is worth 20% and your business report is worth 40%. So in total, this piece of assessment is worth 60% of your total grade. So your oral presentation is worth 20% and then your report is worth 40%. So it's really, really important that you prioritize this piece of assessment and you do your best. This is supposed to be the capstone, the most important piece, or the piece that shows off who you've become and what you can do as a result of finishing your degree. Before I do that, I just wanted to jump into some really great benefits that we can see in this from the Good Universities Guide of completing an internship. And I know that you would have seen some of these in action. You might want to talk about them as well. But one of the things I can see that's been happening, and hopefully you've been making good use of, is that the internship allows you to make good industry contacts. And so even if that particular organisation doesn't have a role, then they might know someone who does. And so by developing those networks and starting to connect with people who are in your industry, that's a really great way of getting future work. And so if you talk to them and say, hey, is there someone in your network that I could reach out to about a job if they don't have one in the company? And this is a good time to ask them for a reference or to be your reference if you are looking soon to be applying for jobs in the field. The internship itself looks really good on your resume, so be sure to add that in, won't it? And internships can be multiple. This is certainly one that's been done through here, facilitated through the university, but you don't have to stop there. Internships are something that you can be doing with other organisations at different times. And so over the summer period, if you said, hey, I don't have as much work as I want, perhaps this is a good time to reach out and ask for an internship at an organisation that might be similar to the one that you would like to work at in the future. We know often these lead to employment opportunities, if not through that organisation, but again through that network. If you do a good job and you show yourself to be faithful, and you show yourself to be a hard and solid worker, then you know that's something that organisations are crying out for. So keep in mind that this doesn't have to be the only internship that you're part of as well. The other thing that's really exciting about internships, and hopefully you've noticed, is that it's a good opportunity to take what you've been learning in the classroom and apply it in the real world. Often you'll be surprised that people are really willing to give you real tasks. So I know students are often given real life tasks to do for real clients. And so it helps you to see that, hey, what I've been learning is real life and it does apply in the real world. And so that's a really good piece of why we do internships here at CHC. And that's what we want you to be thinking about in your assignment is not just, hey, I did this, but what learning from my course specifically could I have applied in this situation, or did I apply in order to do this real world task? So, if you're talking about a digital marketing piece that you were doing, or you're perhaps involved in a project, you might have been doing a small piece of it, but can you link back to some theory from our subject digital marketing that you might have learned? So, we have always be thinking quite specifically back to, okay, these are the subjects I did during my degree. This is what I learnt in those subjects. Can I see this being outworked in the real world? And that's what we're looking for you to bring into your presentation and report. Sometimes internships are not fun, and you might find and that's one of the reasons. I mean, in education, they do a lot of these in different schools, and I speak to students who've been out on prac, and they say, "Hey, you know what? I went to these 5 schools. This type of school I've discovered is not for me." And that's fine. That's actually a really good outcome because better to learn that during a 2-week internship than to have applied and got a job in an organization that you don't enjoy. So an internship helps you to see also what you may not, or an avenue that you might not want to go into down the track. And those are still really valuable experiences. So don't discount them, even if they're uncomfortable. And finally, you can gain an unforgettable life experience. Hopefully, as you've been looking back on the task, you've been able to see that there are some experiences that we weren't able to give you in the classroom, and there's been a starting point perhaps to a future career that you could start to see through this experience. And it's hard. It's hard jumping out of your comfort zone and going in and doing something completely unfamiliar with an unfamiliar team. And you would have felt all of those insecurities and uncomfortableness in those early days, but I'm hoping that you've been able to see that hey, it's worth it, that I can jump out, I can do something difficult, and I can become part of a team really quickly because organizations are normally very welcoming. And hopefully you've found that in your internship. So the good things to reflect upon with this for you would be, hey, what did impact you during that experience? What was that feeling like, and how have they the organization perhaps helped you overcome it, or how did you work to overcome those challenges in the early days? Think about the specific people in the organization. Perhaps someone has inspired you, or that you've been able to see something in them, or a future job, or something that they're doing that you've gone, hey, actually, that looks of interest to me, or I think they do that really well. And finally, what have you discovered about yourself and about other people? What is it that you could see in that team environment? Perhaps you can think back to subjects that you might have done about business or business communication. And hey, how have they set their organization up? And how does that reflect on the people? Can you see a culture perhaps within the organization? Maybe you can see from the top down that you can see that even all the way down to you as an intern, you could feel that culture coming through the organization. And what is it that's developed that culture that you can perhaps discuss or talk on as well? Finally, before we jump into the assignment itself, I just wanted to mention referencing one more time. Really important that we're using the very, very best of CHC referencing in this assignment. That means you're going to need to jump out to grab out the CHC referencing guide. And a couple of things to note is that it's different to not all Harvard referencing is the same. So here, oh, I can't click on there obviously, but if you can see there, it says Dwyer. Notice that there's no full stops here, and there's nothing between the author's initial and the date. You can see here that we've got the name of the book. It's in italics, and then the rest of the details. If this was a journal, then the journal article name would be in inverted quotation marks, and then the name of the journal would be in italics. So If you haven't got the CHC Harvard Guide out, then you're probably not doing this correctly and you're going to lose marks. So please, please, with this one, make an effort to do that correctly. Okay, so let's have a look. How is this going to work? Well, there are two pieces due. The first is the oral presentation, and then you've also got the report. So the oral presentation, as I mentioned earlier, will be by appointment, and it will be during week 13. So you need to reach out to me to make a time for that presentation. Your report, you should have done a draft of before you create your presentation. So the report, really, the information from the report will be what drives your presentation, but we give you a bit more time after the presentation to finalize that report. So I would prepare them both together. You present the oral presentation in week 13. If you were to give the oral on the Tuesday of week 13, then your report will due on the Tuesday of week 14. Does that make sense? If not, you can reach out and let me know. But your written report will be due 7 days after your oral presentation. And excuse the worth there, that's actually incorrect. I was just looking at the activity schedule. It's worth 60%, so the report is worth 40%, not 30 as it shows there. Your word limit, this is a large report, 2,500 words. That does not include appendixes, so if you've included any information in the appendix, it does not work towards that word count. That's just the words in the body of the report. And you'll have a 30-minute oral, then you'll have question time on top of that. And if it's just you and I, then we might not need the full 30 minutes additionally for question time, but we will allow an hour for our session so that we've got that time available. I will publish when everyone's sessions are. So if you'd like to come along to someone else's sessions, and I encourage you to see what their internship was like, you can. Okay, so what we're going to do is just jump into, I didn't think there was a need to really include uh, that in these slides, but the information on the internship is really good in this marking guide. So let's go through it. You can see all the details here. Before you can do your report, you must have completed all 80 hours or up to 120 hours at the host organisation. And also your workplace supervisor must have completed that final performance evaluation. So remember in the handbook, right at the end in the appendix 2, there was that one-page evaluation. You need to have your supervisor fulfill that in, and that needs to be part of this report as well. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to be doing a really detailed report of what happened and your experience during the work integrated learning, and also what you've learned about the organisation. So you may need to ask some additional questions if it wasn't clear, and this might be an opportunity at the end to reach out and ask some of these questions if you don't understand or you hadn't perhaps gathered this detail during your time with that host organisation. One of them is that we want you to have an understanding of how that organisation goes together, what its structure is, what its culture is, what the industry environment is, and that's a great place to include some research. So if you're in an accounting industry, you might be able to do some research about the number of accounting firms or the size of accounting firms to give us a feel of what sort of environment they're sitting in. Or perhaps if you're in an accounting firm, you could talk about the type of accounting that they undertake. There's obviously different tiers of accounting firms or sizes of businesses that they work for, and you could include some of that detail there. Some organizations have an organizational chart, and so you might be able to ask for that organizational chart, even if it didn't have names on it. Or you could create your own. Or you could explain, for example, if there's different tiers, you could explain that visually, or you could include that in your words, how you explain that structure of the organisation is made. And this would be a good place to include some theory from our course. So if you've studied leadership, human behaviour in organisations, HRM, if you've studied any of those subjects, or even at the beginning when we looked at business, introduction to business and management, there you would know that we spoke a little bit about organizational culture and some of those subjects. That's a good place to start looking at some theory that you might be able to pull out about perhaps the leadership styles that you can see in operation, or perhaps the way that they've developed the model of structure that they have in place. So can you see self-managed work teams, for example, or is it a more traditional structure for that organisation? You're also going to then give a detailed reflection on all the aspects of your internship, the objectives that you had, the tasks, that you were able to undertake, and your achievements. And you will include your weekly diary to help with that within the report. So you might include that as an appendix and refer to it in the report. If you're using a diary, it'd be great to have this professionally presented. So a typed copy of an overview would be great there. Then, just like we did in assignment 2, we're going to be able, at a deeper level, look at the planning and the problems and any completion, that any obstacles that may have come up in your internship. And that's a really good place as well to think about, hey, what was I going to do? And then what happened actually in practice? What were some of those objectives that I wasn't able to meet? Or how did I pivot and change those so that I could make them more realistic to achieve during the time of my internship? This is where you might pull out specific examples from the weekly diary if you needed to as evidence here as well. One of the things that's really, really important, and I can't speak enough to, is that you need to, in this assignment, in order to pass, show direct linkages between what you did in your internship and the theory and information that you learnt during your degree. It's not just enough to say, in BZ100, we learnt this. Not good enough. That will not pass this assignment. What you need to do is actually go in to the specific information in the course that you learnt that was then applied in the organization. So if you, for example, were looking at digital marketing or you're working on digital marketing, then you need to go back to the digital marketing course and have a look at the theories you learnt, have a look at the weekly topics, have a look at some of the specific detail of what was covered, and then pull out pieces as evidence of things that would then be applied in the workplace. So if you're working on digital marketing pieces for a company, how does that link back to a theory that you learnt in that digital marketing subject, or in services marketing, or in introduction to marketing? Or if it's in accounting, we need to be looking back all the time to, I did this task and this is specifically, and you'll be using your textbooks from those subjects, and you'll be using your notes from those subjects and your learning modules. And we need to see that specific linking and not general. I don't want it to say, in digital marketing, we learned about digital marketing and this is, I did digital marketing. That will not pass this subject. So we need you to be able to show us, what was it in that subject that you were able to draw on in your internship. Okay. The other thing that we need to include this time is analysis and application of relevant scriptural principles, and they should be integrated throughout the different sections of your report. So what could you see in practice? Maybe there were some ethical implications that you were having to be aware of, or maybe it was your attitude. Maybe you were thinking about faithfulness to the employer. Maybe it was having being happy even when you didn't feel happy. Or could you see some things in operation, or did you use anything in your internship, or some scriptural principles that you've that might have been applied during this experience? And then we should have a detailed analysis of outcomes and solutions. So this is the really exciting part, and it's that deeper level thinking. So we expect you to have a section in your report and also in your oral where you make some recommendations. So you have a think through, okay, this was my experience. I've reflected on what happened and what I was thinking and how I went about it and how it links back to my learning. And now, okay, let's critically reflect. What are some recommendations for the host organization? What do I see that maybe they could look at improving, or they could build in? Maybe there's a process or a policy, or maybe it's the way they inducted you into the organization. There could be any number of things that might be a recommendation. And then for CHC, are there any recommendations that you can make to CHC based on your experience here? And also then finally for yourself. So that self-reflection piece is a really big part of an internship. So can you reflect on, what could I do as a result of this experience? Or what has this taught me? Or what would I do differently in the future? And all of that should link back to the actual internship again. And this might be another good place to include that link back to scriptural principles. So there should be a variety of recommendations, more than one or two, and it should look at, if you've noticed problems throughout and you've mentioned any problems in your report, this is where specifically we do look for you to have recommendations to overcome those obstacles or those issues. And again, if you suggest a recommendation, then you should back that up with research. So if I'm suggesting a new management style, or if I'm suggesting something, then can you find some scholarly research? That means it's a journal article or from a textbook or a theory that I've learned that helps to back up make the case for why the organization should do it. Finally, you should include that performance evaluation, which we mentioned earlier, and your own student feedback evaluation. So you'll find both of those in the workbook, and of course your weekly diary as well. So we need to see all 80 hours ticked off at least there. You might be doing more than that as well. You'll see here that we've got a report structure. The difference this time is that we are expecting an executive summary. So that means that you have a one-page overview of all of the findings of your report. If you need an example of that, please let me know. We do go through that in a number of subjects, so I'm assuming that you would have that knowledge. If you find that's a gap and you would like some help with your executive summary, please reach out and I can give a quick video on it, or I can send you through an example of an executive summary to have a look at. So we have our table of contents. Please watch display here. We expect this to be something that you could present to the board, so completely professional. Your introduction, who's it for and why. Your main body, so you'd use proper titles, not criterion 1, criterion 2, the proper titles that you can see here. So give these a title. Maybe it's organizational overview would be a title. Okay. You make those up. And then your recommendations will be a title, and you'll have a conclusion. Your conclusion doesn't need new information. It should briefly summarize what you discussed and then draw it to a close. You should also have a signature area where you sign and date the report, add your references in correct CHC Harvard guide, and your appendixes. It's really important that you have adequate and quite a lot of detailed research from the different subjects that you've been undertaking. You cannot do this report without going back to the subjects and going through those modules and your textbooks. If you need to, because it's likely that you haven't kept all the textbooks from your studies, you can go to the library and they do have copies of all the texts. So I would suggest that in completing this assessment that you are spending time in the library. You're going into your module material, and then you're pulling those textbooks to find specific details from those texts in order to refer to those in your work. Okay, you've got the oral presentation is going to be a summary of this, and you can see here that it goes through each of those as well. Really important that the presentation is a summary of what you found in the report. It's not, though, a complete reading of your report. You don't stand up and read the report. You will present it in a completely professional manner, dressed professionally, and you'll be using PowerPoint. So it's a PowerPoint presentation, and I have opened an example of a past student up for you. We don't always do this, but I have put up an example for you of a student who has given one of these in the past. So you can get an idea of how this is presented and some of the information that she covered, just to help you get a feel for some of the professionalism here that's required. In order to make sure it's really presentable and professional, you'll have the same structure. So you'll have that introduction, you'll have your overview of all those areas, and you'll have a specific conclusion. So make sure you're thinking about the structure of your presentation. That's really important. And also, this is a good place to include that theory as well. So as you talk through the tasks, then you'll need to, as you go, link through. And I know I've seen them in the past, and students have had the task or an overview of a piece of it, and then on the side they've had the specific theory that links back to it and some examples. So they were able to talk between them as they went through the presentation. So here you'll find your criterion. You can see that it's very specific, lots of detail. So I'd suggest that you have a read through it. I'm not going to go through it now because you have got it written, but you can see here, like criterion 4 shows a strong focus on their degree major. So if you've majors in marketing, then I expect to see marketing theory used here. You can draw from other areas of your degree as well, but I do expect to see a number of marketing units and specific marketing theory referred to there. You can see here criteria 5 is a superior integration of scriptural principles with analysis. So that's quite a lot of your final mark there. So it's really important that you're thinking about that and integrating it throughout your work. And you can see here for a high distinction in criteria 6, you need to have an extremely high level, well articulated, broad range of options or for solutions and or recommendations for the organisation, for the CHC, and for the self. And that's based on work and referencing as well. You can see that the supervisor's feedback is worth marks there, along with your own reflection on that feedback. And your research here is important criteria as well. Finally, for the presentation, you can see here that we've got a really, and again, an overview of an organisation, what it was that you did, theory, that linkage to theory to practice, looking at issues and problems, and then your recommendations and biblical perspective. You've got 30 minutes, so you'll have a lot of detail, a lot of time to cover all of this information. And of course, the fact that you've used some technical aids will be important as well. And some marks for how you put it together and the structure, making sure that you're thinking about how you're structuring that big presentation piece. Okay, I'm going to stop the share and I'll reshare these slides as we finish off. Here we go. Okay. Okay, so what next? It's time to start drafting your final report. So this is a good time just to put down on paper to begin with. What was the organizational structure and an overview? That's a good place to start. And to do this, we think, who's who in the zoo? Where did you fit into the organisation, and how does that fit through the structure? So think from the top down. How does it all work together? And perhaps they're happy to share with you an organisational chart, and that might help you with that piece. If it's quite a simple structure, you might even be able to draw your own. And in PowerPoint, there's actually an organisational structure tool which will help you with that if you needed to, or you can, of course, explain that as well. Where did you fit in? What did you do? Think about that as well. Look back through your diary notes and think about the different tasks. Can you group them together perhaps into different sections? So you looked at these type of things. Maybe there were 3 or 4 key areas that you helped with the organization. Maybe you can look at them specifically and kind of look at them in blocks of tasks. Then think about, what have I been learning in my degree? Go back and have a look at the different subjects that you've taken over your time, and then think back and maybe go back into those modules and have a look at the specific areas that you learned in each of those. And they might trigger some of the ideas of things that you could then dig deeper into. Pull out those textbooks and say, okay, I did digital marketing. Let's pull out that digital marketing textbook and look for some of the theories or some of the areas that we specifically looked at that I actually did that in my internship and I might not have even realized. It's really important that you're weaving into your discussion that previous university learning into and citing those correctly using CHC Harvard. So those are really important to be doing. If you're not sure, please let me know. I think we've covered this, but really also important to include those scriptural principles. So what did you experience, observe, and learn that you can relate to biblical principles? Finally, we do need to see that self-reflection. So make sure that you're thinking about, hey, what was my attitude or my initiative or my leadership? And how did you meet your goals? And what would you do differently? So those are really good things. What happened? Why did it happen? And what as a result, what have I learned? Really, really important to go through that process for yourself and to make sure that then you're giving those recommendations for yourself, for the organisation, and also for CHC. And that will be a really important sort of outcome of your learning. So the next step is to contact me to make your oral time. Once we've got these in place, I'll send you a calendar invite so you've got that ready to go. But also I'll pop them up in our Moodle page so that with the Zoom you can jump in if you would like to other people's orals. I think that'd be really great if you could, because it would be great to have more than just me watching them. We used to do this in class and we would have everyone along, and I think that's a really fun way of doing it. But now I understand that everyone's online, it's a little bit more challenging. But if you can make someone else's, that would be a really great way of supporting each other. Your report will be due that week after, but again, my suggestion is do the report and then do the oral, and then look to have that final week just to tidy up the report and to adjust and include any other additional things that come out of our discussion after your oral. I think that's it. So that's all for now. If you have any questions after watching this, then please let me know. I'm happy to jump on one-on-one with you if you need to. Otherwise, I will set up a class time for us as well. If you can make that, that'd be great. I'm really, really excited to see your reports and your oral presentations. These have been fantastic to see the progress made so far on these internships. So great job. Keep up the great work and please reach out if you need any help. Okay, I'm going to just stop the recording and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.